Good evening and welcome to the Southwest Michigan Regional Chamber's 2023 St. Joseph City Commission Candidate Forum, hosted in partnership with News Talk Sports 94.9 WSJM. I'm Johnny Reinhardt, Program Director for 94.9 WSJM for Midwest Family Southwest Michigan, and I'll be co-moderating tonight's event alongside Arthur Havlicek, President and CEO of the Southwest Michigan Regional Chamber of Commerce. Before we get started, we'd like to welcome those in attendance here at the Shadowland Ballroom, as well as those tuning in live on News Talk Sports 94.9 WSJM FM, on our Facebook, as well as our YouTube, and on WSJM.com and our WSJM app, or on demand via the podcast. We'd also like to acknowledge the support received from our friends and Chief Engineer Terry Green, who made the technical magic on the back end possible for folks to listen at home. And also shout out to Zach East and Ken Lundberg for running our live stream as well. And big thank you to all of those that are watching and listening, maybe at home as well. Thank you also to the Shadowland Ballroom for graciously serving as the venue for tonight's event, and to Silver Beach Pizza, who will be providing the appetizers for the networking portion that follows this forum. Arthur, why don't you tell everyone what to expect this evening?
Thank you, Johnny, and thank you to WSJM, Shadowland, and all who've partnered with us to make today's public service possible. As the voice for business in the region, the Southwest Michigan Regional Chamber has a responsibility to communicate where those seeking public office stand on matters important to our members and our community. We take this obligation seriously, which is why we're pleased to host yet another candidate forum for the St. Joseph City Commission race. Much like in 2021, this election has 6 candidates, including 1 incumbent, vying for 3 open seats. The top 2 vote getters in November will be elected to 4-year terms, and the candidate with the third most votes will get a 2-year term. This race will change the complexion of the 5-member nonpartisan council, including determining who the mayor will be now that Mayor Laura Goose is no longer seeking re-election. I saw the mayor in the back. Let's take a moment and thank her for her service. Candidates, tonight we're going to ask you a series of questions compiled by our team at the Chamber in concert with the WSJM News team. You'll be afforded 1 minute to answer each question, and we will be determining the response order by random drawing throughout the night. The questions will be difficult. Your response times are short. We're going to ask follow-up questions if additional clarification is needed. So listen carefully, answer concisely, and try to differentiate yourselves respectfully from your opponents. Out of respect for the candidates' time and for those listening live on WSJM or on Facebook Live, we do ask that the audience refrain from applause until the conclusion of the event. With that, we're going to get started with 1-minute introductions into your background and an elevator pitch as to why voters should support your candidacy. Let's get started.
And we'll start with Michael Fernandez.
Good evening. My name is Michael Fernandez. It's a pleasure to be here and to be considered as a candidate for the St. Joseph City Commission. My wife and I have lived in St. Joe for 7 years, and we chose St. Joe chiefly because it's where we wanted to raise our family. There was a lot of things that were attractive for my wife and I, from the beaches, the downtown area, proximity to a lot of activities that we liked, but nothing was more important than the school systems and the opportunities that this community offers to raise our family. In my free time, what little of that there is, having 4 children, I like to coach flag football, baseball, and I'm heavily involved in coaching young kids, including my own, in our community. And it's my devotion to the children and the future of this community that's really what I want you to know is why I'm running, and want you to consider me. I'm committed to making St. Joe a place for all families in all stages of their life to live and grow. New families to come move here and enjoy the things that we as the residents here love. And as we age, I want it to be a good place to grow old as well. So thank you for considering me.
Thank you, Michael. And next up, we'll have Chris Lannert.
Good evening. My name's Chris Lannert. I live here. I grew up here. I moved here in 2nd grade. I went to St. Joe Catholic School when my dad was employed at Whirlpool. Graduated from St. Joe High. I went on to Michigan State. Then went on to my professional career in landscape architecture, urban and regional planning and entitlements over in the Chicagoland area, but started buying my first properties here back in town about 25 years ago, and I moved here permanently about 6 years ago. I live down on the beach, and so I've participated with all of the stuff that's gone on there. I really think that the reason that I want to be elected is that I have a lot that I think I can offer to improve the city. We don't have much to improve here. We're starting with a great place already, but I think that we can get a little bit, better. My background and experience allows me to be able to point out some of the low-hanging fruit that we sometimes, walk by, and I'm looking forward to doing that and working with
Thank you,
our
Mr. Lanner.
staff.
Thank you. And next up, Sean Osborne.
Good evening. My name's Sean Osborne. Born and raised here in St. Joe. Grew up in a little subdivision off of Lincoln Avenue. Moved away a couple times, and actually just the beauty of the city and that lake right out there, that puddle, there's something magical about it. It's brought me back every time. Growing up in the city, I spent time as a firefighter for St. Joe Township. Moving on later, I became a police officer, served for 3 different communities, so I have a call for public service. I just love to serve my community. I spent 18 and a half years with one of the major phone carriers as a network engineer, so I understand technology, staffing, budgets. So I love this city. I just have this desire to serve. So I figure if I can't be a cop anymore, might as well see if I can become a commissioner and help that way.
Thank you. Next up, Brooke Thomas.
Thank you. My name is Brooke Thomas, and I am one of your current city commissioners. I was elected 2 years ago, and I've loved every minute of it. I've tried to do as much as I could to be involved with any aspect of the city that I can. I've attended numerous conferences, meetings, trainings. I've met with various residents and leaders both in and outside of St. Joe, because I think having those connections in and around your city is very important, just to kind of know what's going on both in your city and around it. I am from the area. I spent most of my adult life in and around St. Joe. I attended Lakeshore High School, and then I obtained both my master's and bachelor's degrees from Grand Valley State University in social work. I currently work at the Children's Advocacy Center of Southwest Michigan, where I forensically interview child victims of sexual and physical abuse. So I work alongside law enforcement, the prosecutor's office, and other agencies in our area to assist in those roles. I think I'd be a great asset to continue on the commission because I'm hardworking and I am ready to do what needs to be done to get the job done.
Thank you. And Tess Ulrich.
Hi, I'm Tess Ulrich. I have lived in St. Joseph since 2016. I was a renting resident in Precinct 1 then, and I'm a current renting resident in Precinct 2 right now. I have 2 daughters right now who are both enrolled in St. Joe Public Schools. I'm a strong supporter of our partnership with the public schools, and one of the reasons that I too chose to live in St. Joseph. I ran for City Commission back in 2021 as well, and some things have stayed the same. I'm still just as progressive as I was then. I'm still a renting resident, and I'm still dedicated to improving the diversity and inclusion work that leaders like Brooke have forwarded in the commission. Since then, though, I've grown in my role at the Boys and Girls Club, and at the Boys and Girls Club, I've learned a lot about federal and state funding in particular, and some of the partnerships and resources that come when we work within those systems. In addition to that, I've become very involved with the Berrien County Democratic Party, and while I understand and acknowledge the importance of nonpartisan roles, I also think it's important to remain aligned on some of those values. Thank you.
And lastly, David Yardley.
First of all, I'd like to thank WSJM and the Southwest Regional Chamber of Commerce for hosting this. No matter who you vote for out of the 6 of us, you have 6 dedicated people up here who really want to make a difference. So I'm David Yardley. I've been a lifelong resident of Berrien County, attended River Valley High School. I'm a graduate of the Michigan Political Leadership Program at Michigan State University. I've worked in the state legislature previously for a state representative and then for a caucus in Lansing. Currently, I am the district liaison for Senator Jonathan Lindsay, who just won election this last year. I work for Harbor Country Harbor Country Mission in Bridgman. We provide services and support to low-income residents throughout the three-county area. So I've got a diverse background as far as bringing together people, helping assist people, and would like your vote. Thank you.
Candidates, as you may recall, in 2021, the last time several of you ran, a group of over 50 business leaders signed on to a letter to the city asking for better communication, better flexibility, and a better working relationship between the city and its businesses. Do you believe there's been a tangible improvement on this front in the years since? If so, how? And if not, what specifically do you think still needs to change?
And the first person that has a chance to answer this is Tess Ulrey.
Thank you. So when I first moved to St. Joseph, my role was actually with St. Joseph Today. That was an incredible way to get to know the business community here, and honestly, kind of a crash course in exactly what small business was here on the lakefront. My experiences and the people that I still know and support that still operate those businesses downtown is that improvement definitely has been made in some of that communication. My understanding from them, and a conversation that I'd love to keep forwarding, is how we can continue to update some of the zoning regulations and laws that were put into place longer ago than may still be accurate. So I think that the commission has done a great job in moving some of that communication forward, but my understanding is there is still some improvement to be made, but all in good faith on both sides.
Thank you. And the next person that has a chance to answer this is Chris Lannert.
Thank you. Well, I did run also and was very much aware of this issue that existed. As you can see on my information, there is a perception out there that it's St. Charles no attitude. And by that I mean that in many cases, while our staff is capable and while our staff certainly is helpful, they tend to live pretty much in their individual silos, and there's not enough blending of information between the departments, and as a result of that, many of our customers, our potential remodelers or builders, end up having difficulty working through some of our ordinances. In all justification to our staff, the ordinances are somewhat lacking in terms of their clarity, and so we're challenging our employees, our staff, to work with ordinances that don't have the answers that they're looking for. So I think one of the things that we can do is contemporize some of our ordinances by adjusting them and having a little bit more of a can-do attitude.
Thank you. And real quick, Mr. Lannert, could you bring that microphone just a little closer to you? Wonderful, thank you. Your next candidate that has a chance to answer that question is Michael Fernandez. You have 1 minute.
Yeah, I think that there's been a lot of development in the last couple of years. I didn't run myself. This is my first candidacy, for this office. But as I talk to people on the doors, while I've been canvassing and talk to business owners in the city, there's a desire, and I think the obstacles are, what a couple of folks have mentioned is, some of the ordinances. And I think what it's going to take to overcome that is being willing to have an open mind and look at some of these ordinances that, may have made sense at the time, but updating them to what our current businesses need to do, to run their operations and develop for the future. So I think having an open mind and being able to rework some of those to things that make sense today.
Thank you. And next up, Sean Osborne. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. So there's always room to improve with anything, and from what I'm gathering from some of the small businesses I've talked to about things, that there's still a lack of communication between the city and the local businesses. Some of them don't feel their voices are being heard. Some of them don't understand the process in dealing with some of these situations. So I feel that we really need to find a way to open up that line of communication between our businesses and the commission, along with our staff, and really kind of come together as a community and help each other, because without the business, we're just, we're not the flourishing city that we see. We've lost too many businesses already for different reasons, and we need to really look at this and as a whole and work together.
Thank you. And next person to answer the question, Brooke Thomas.
Thank you. Before I was elected to the commission, the city was working on ways to improve their relationship with local businesses. They were holding public meetings and trying to listen to the concerns that were in existence. And I went to those meetings and I was listening to what the concerns were, and then after being elected, I did go to as many downtown businesses as I could to just introduce myself, pass out my card and say, we're here to listen, what's working, what's not working. And so from my experience, I feel like the relationship has improved over time. One of the things we did as a commission was we hired an assistant city manager who was able to spend a lot more time improving those relationships with our downtown businesses. One of the things that we approved was a facade grant program, also a public space activation program that has been just one way to work with our local businesses to show that we're listening, we care, we want to help improve your businesses. But there's always room for improvement, but that was just a couple of ways that we were able to assist our businesses.
Thank you. And lastly, David Yardley, you have 1 minute.
All right, thank you. Communication can always be improved. One of the things that I've done over my lifetime has been a communications consultant for chambers of commerce, businesses, and other organizations. We need to utilize the technology that we have available to continue to upgrade the website. I mean, there's some fantastic examples of websites that exist that are available 24/7 for people who don't work, or aren't available during normal business hours. We have to look for alternative ways of engaging our businesses. They are our main tax base after real estate. So we need to look at that. We need to make sure that the business community is an integral part of what's happening in business and what's happening with the city in regard to that. Zoning and regulations are always going to be an issue, especially when there's, as Mr. Lannert said, they're not clear definitions of what they are. So we need to improve that and educate the business community. Thank you.
Next question, Arthur.
Keeping with the topic of the city's role as it relates to businesses, there is legislation currently moving through the Michigan State Legislature that would give Michigan's 1,800 plus units of local government permission to enact their own rules and regulations governing private employers' relationships with their employees. This means St. Joseph could set a minimum wage higher than the state's minimum, set paid or unpaid leave time and other fringe benefits, set regulations on work stoppages or strikes, and more. Do you agree things like minimum wage and job benefits should be set by local units of government? If you are in support, what employment policies would you seek to enact locally and oversee as a city commissioner?
And the first person that has a chance to answer that question is Michael Fernandez. Michael, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, I think the ability to have local control over things such as minimum wage and other, the other things that you mentioned, it allows us the flexibility to, for all of our different communities throughout the state to set those things for things that make sense, wages that make sense for the standard of living in their community. Having one blanket, state minimum wage doesn't make sense everywhere. So I would absolutely support, us having the ability to set that minimum wage to reflect what our, living wages are here in the city. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Chris Lannert, you have 1 minute.
Well, that's an area that I don't think I'm that well vested in. I guess from a personal standpoint, the communities are really not partners with the businesses, so I don't know how much more the communities are going to bring in terms of legislating for the various businesses, what those particular wages might be. I think a more productive way would be to use the local control to improve the place, the community, make it a desirable community so that people would be attracted to the area for the benefits that the area has, parks, schools, obviously our lake, and then have that be the impetus, for the various businesses to negotiate what those wages might be. But that's not really an area of my expertise.
Thank you. And next person to have a chance to answer that is David Yardley. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. No, I'm opposed to the local minimum wage regulations. Our federal government bases that on a whole bunch of dynamics across the country. We don't need to have little fiefdoms around the state or around our community that have higher or lower wages. I mean, if Benton Harbor wanted to have a lower wage than what St. Joe was, we would have a loss of employees and revenue. So we need to stick where we're supposed to be, and that's in administering city government. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Sean Osborne, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. I have to agree with Mr. Yardley. This is not something that would be within our lane. As David was saying, that the federal government does oversee a multitude of different aspects to making and creating the minimum wage. It would be so difficult to try to dictate, leaving it to each individual business. It's not my lane. I haven't dealt with minimum wage in a long time, but I believe in a fair wage for an honest day's work. I just don't see how a small community could manage this, no matter what rules you put into place. So I would be against that.
Thank you. And next person has a chance to answer the question. Tess Ulrey, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, I am strongly in support of the legislation that is currently moving through Michigan, specifically in regards to a prevailing wage. When we look at prevailing wage, I understand that's scary to think about, but it is also our responsibility, especially as a community, to take care of the citizens of our community, and that living wage is a huge part of it. I'm not that far removed from living off minimum wage, and I definitely see the importance of our community in that type of prevailing wage. It's always a conversation, of course, between communities, and something like that doesn't necessarily alienate businesses, but it becomes a partnership, and it's something that's very important, I believe, for us to support as a city commission.
Thank you. And lastly, for this question, Brooke Thomas, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. One of the things that I like to do as a commissioner is take a look at all sides of any kind of an issue. So I would definitely take a look at this issue and look at the pros and the cons. One thing that I do want to keep in mind is that we want to make sure that the people who are providing our services and our workforce can afford to live in this city. And I know that the prices of our homes and the rental prices are just creeping up and up. I do keep an eye on our housing market, and I see that those prices are going up. So we got to make sure that the people who live here can afford to be here. So if that means taking a look at some of these minimum wage requirements, then that's something that we could do.
Thank you. Arthur?
Similar to the previous question, there is legislation being considered that would alter the regulation, enforcement, and revenue implications of short-term rentals, or STRs, for local communities. Currently, new STRs are only allowed in the Water Recreation District as a conditional use, and either conditional or special use in R3 multiple family residence districts. Broadly speaking, what is your stance on short-term rentals? Do you agree with the city's regulations as they stand today, or are there specific changes you'd like to see regarding where they're allowed and how permits are approved?
All right, the first person who has a chance to answer that is Chris Lannert. Chris, you have 1 minute.
Wow, a difficult question. I first started buying properties down by the beach in about 25 years ago. So I understand the short-term rental aspects. I still live in that community presently, and have 2 full-time residents in the 3 units that I still own. Obviously, as a planner and entitlement specialist, I think it's absolutely imperative that the local jurisdictions control the short-term rental markets. They can set the places, they can set the terms and conditions where those are appropriate or not. I think our town has done a very good job in terms of designating those areas, obviously grandfathering in those ones that existed prior to that time. I obviously have a little bit of a difference of opinion because I sit on the DDA also, and we're looking right now at short-term rentals in the unoccupied existing units in the downtown, and obviously I would support that from a downtown development authority perspective.
Thank you. Next up, Tess Ulrey, you have 1 minute.
I understand and acknowledge, and I love living in a lakefront community, and we need some of these short-term rentals here so that those people can come in, spend money in our restaurants, and spend money downtown. The flip side of that is I am a renter myself, and so bringing up the short-term rental the short-term rental conversation, I think is relatively nuanced. I believe that within this conversation, we need to look at how many other rentals are available for families like myself who live here year-round, who have kids in school, and who work in local businesses year-round as well. Right now, I do think that the city has done a good job of managing those short-term rentals. I think there's creative ways to work within short-term rentals as well, whether that's something that you live on the property or there's all these ways to do it. However, I don't think that the city of St. Joseph needs more short-term rentals until we can figure out what's going on with those year-round rentals as well.
Thank you. Next up, David Yardley. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. Short-term rentals actually is kind of an interesting subject from my work with Harbor Country Mission. We found that a lot of seniors can't afford their houses anymore, but if they could rent out a room in their home, they might actually be able to have enough revenue to keep it. And as long as we have zoning ordinances in place for garbage and noise and all those other things, we already have a lot of that addressed. On top of that, Airbnb and VRBO, the two leading short-term rental companies, already police their own hosts, I guess is the right term, with ratings and whatnot, and they will take away the ability to host on those sites. So we need to look at it in a balanced way. How can we help some of those people that Tessa's talked about that are on the lower income scale still stay in their homes? I mean, there's a lot of older people in this audience, and I'm getting to be one of those older people myself that, you know, it gets harder. As inflation is going higher and higher, we need to find alternatives.
Thank you. Next up, Brooke Thomas. Brooke, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. I have attended many meetings on this very topic, both within the city and with other municipalities around the county. It's a very hot topic. The main theme is that we all need to keep that local control because there's a lot of talk about the state taking that control and doing things with that legislation. On one hand, if you have too many, you lose your residential population. If you restrict it altogether, that's illegal, so you have to find that sweet spot that's right in the middle. One of the things that I like the sound of is putting it in a place, putting short-term rentals in a place that makes sense, such as in your business or commercial areas, just like any other business. It seems to make sense for both the residents and the tourists. So I'm happy to keep looking at the issue and figuring out what makes sense for our city.
Thank you. Next up, Michael Fernandez. You have 1 minute.
To echo some of the comments made before, I think the key is, local control and all communities having, the ability to set their regulations, and so making sure that that remains at the local level so that St. Joseph can do what makes sense for St. Joseph and other communities can do that. I will always support local control of this issue, and here specifically in St. Joseph, I think we have done a nice job of finding what works and what that balance level is between having some short-term rentals, to allow for that tourism industry, but focusing on keeping those to zones, and I think it's worked very well for us. So,
thank you. And lastly, for this question, Sean Osborne, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. Like everybody else said, it's an extremely hot topic and with a lot of mixed emotion. I feel that if you invest into a home, you want to use it as a rental. That's your business. You should be able to do with it pretty much whatever you want to within reason. I do also agree that we should have designated areas for these short-term rentals versus long-term rentals, so we don't see that the city becomes overpopulated with short-term rentals versus long-term rentals, or people leaving the area because they can get more for their home, move out of the area, and then it becomes a short-term rental. I believe that should all be dictated within the city. We should be able to have control over that and know who these short-term rentals are, how to contact these people. As long as they take care of their properties, they're well maintained, the visitors obey by the law, I don't have a problem with it.
Thank you. Arthur?
Adjacent to short-term rentals is the topic of tourism. Despite tourism being a key economic driver for our region, there are some residents who believe St. Joseph already sees too many visitors as it is. As a commissioner, what would your response to these residents be? Would you like to see St. Joseph capture more of the growing tourism market, or do you also believe we're already at capacity?
Yeah, the first person who has a chance to answer that question is Michael Fernandez. Michael, you have 1 minute.
I think we have a beautiful community, and personally, I want to see us show it off. I welcome, tourism. They bring a lot to our area. And I think we need to just keep an eye and make sure that we're balancing and taking care of the needs of those of us that live here full time. But by no means are the two exclusive. I think the two work together by welcoming in the tourists and finding ways to integrate them seamlessly, especially during the seasonal times that they are visiting. We can really enhance our community and make it better year round. So the two go together. It's not one or the other.
Thank you. Next up, Brooke Thomas, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. We do have a lot of tourism in the summer months. What I would like to see is a lot more tourism in those off seasons. So I know that St. Joe Today puts on a lot of events throughout the year. One of the things that I really like seeing is the ice festival that we have. It's such a fun event to show off what we have in the winter. I know a lot of people shy away from the winter, but there's so many communities up north that really embrace the cold, and they have the beer tents and they have the fire pits and everything, and I think it's something that we could do to really celebrate the winter months that we have here, and then that way not only are we giving our residents something more to do in those cold months, but we are bringing more business to our local businesses, so everybody wins that way. And then the issue of parking and everything like that isn't as bad because you're bringing in that tourism in the off season when there's plenty of parking wherever you go in the city.
Thank you. Next up for this question, David Yardley. David, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. Tourism, as with any brick and mortar type normal business that's here year round, it's a balance. I mean, we shouldn't be trying to pick winners and losers within the business community, within the free market. But we do need to look at ways to develop more year-round businesses. I mean, we've got some great organizations that are doing that in the area with the Chambers specifically, Connexus, the Lake Michigan College programs, and various other things. So we need to find ways that we could take what we have here to make it a year-round business as well. The tourism is always going to be here. I mean, that lake is beautiful. People want to come see it. They come and want to be on the beach and handle that. But on the flip side, we have, as again with Harbor Country Mission, we see a lot of the homeless population, the request for food and clothing and blankets. It's dramatically increasing. It's already increasing as we've had this little cold spell just in the last few days. So we do need to manage all of our activities.
Thank you. And next up, Chris Lannert. Chris, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. Well, this is one of those questions that's not either or, it's both. We really have to find a blending so that we can satisfy both sides of the pendulum or the equation. You can't forget that we have a lake out here which is a premier destination. We're always going to attract people who are going to want to enjoy it much as we do on a daily basis. I think the thing that we need to do is to showcase in terms of our community the things that we have to offer for permanent residents, and then use those vacationers and those tourists to try and hook them into staying here a long time. Certainly the remote commuting has helped us, but I think that if we could encourage tourism because we need it for our businesses, but yet try and snare some of those very tourists to live here full time and enjoy our schools, enjoy our park, enjoy the community that we all enjoy. We need to grow the pie in this community. We don't need to exclude people from the feast.
Thank you. Next up, Sean Osborne. Sean, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. We do live in one of the most beautiful cities in the state of Michigan. I've traveled all over the state and quite a few places within our own country, and this is just an amazing, amazing city. Being that I was born and raised here and got to grow up here, I've seen tourism exponentially increase, which you want to see. I'm getting mixed emotions from the residents of the city that say they can't get downtown during the summer because of the overabundance of visitors. But like we've talked, like has been mentioned, it needs to be a blending. We've got to be able to attract people, keep people coming, but yet then research and look at ways that we can bring them in throughout the entire season instead of just the summer season. There's many things that we can do, but we got to look at it as a whole. And yeah, I'll just leave it there.
Okay, thank you. And lastly for this question, Tess Ulrey, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. I came to St. Joseph as a tourist and as a visitor. My parents actually bought their retirement home here, and then that's why we're here, because it is that beautiful, and we loved visiting it in the summertime. So tourism definitely, I think, is something that we need to keep. when I hear that type of feedback, and especially as a commissioner, what I would be interested in hearing is a little bit more of the why and why that is frustrating people. Is it parking? Is it they can't access some of the resources they need? Is it too hard to park at City Hall and pay a parking ticket? I'd be interested to dive more into the conversation of exactly what it is about that excessive tourism. Like a lot of the other candidates have said, I'd also love to continue supporting all of those awesome off-season activities that St. Joseph Today does, as well as other community organizations. I think there's also ways for us to look at the people who live year-round, downtown and here below the bluff, hear their concerns, and find ways to make sure that they are celebrated as year-round residents and make it more accessible for them.
Thank you. This is News Talk Sports, 94.9 WSJM, and we are hosting the 2023 St. Joseph City Commission Candidate Forum, if you're just joining us, along with the Southwest Michigan Regional Chamber here at the Shadowland Ballroom. Arthur, what's our next question?
Sure. Well, Tess provided a great segue because another frequent complaint that you'll likely hear as commissioners will be regarding parking, particularly in our downtown. This lack or perceived lack of parking has on multiple occasions prevented potential developments from moving forward. The question's pretty simple. Do you believe there's currently enough parking for residents and visitors in downtown St. Joseph? And what would your solution be to increasing turnover and availability?
And the first person who has a chance to answer this is Brooke Thomas. Brooke, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. This is a great question because I am on our parking committee for the city. It's one thing that keeps coming up again and again is that there's not enough parking. What I've learned over time is that maybe it's not that there's not enough parking, it's where are people parking? What is the hot spots? So we are working with a company who's helping us find the answers to that. We're in the middle of the process, and I'm learning a lot already just as far as, how far are people willing to walk? How much do they want to pay? How much do they want to use their bikes to get to these different areas around town? One of the things I would like to see is to try to use those micro transportation things such as bikes. Maybe people want to rollerblade downtown, I don't know. But just getting those alternate methods to be creative instead of trying to shove more cars downtown. Let's get people down there in different ways.
Thank you. And next person to be able to answer this is Tess Ulrey. Tess, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. So in terms of is there enough parking, kind of like Brooke said, I'm not exactly sure about the answer, but it's good to hear that the city is diving into exactly what that is. I know from living and working downtown, it is extremely frustrating to need that place to park for work or for anything else. I think there's ways for us to think creatively to make sure that residents of St. Joseph have definitive parking, maybe that's a permit system, maybe it's special lots. I'm not exactly sure, but I do want to acknowledge that the residents need some access to that. I think there's also ways for us to encourage more of that biking, more of that walking, and I'll use myself as an example. I actually walked down here from my house today too. So I think that the more we make that kind of thing accessible, the better it'll help alleviate some of the parking issues.
Thank you. And next up, Michael Fernandez. Michael, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, I think it's a good problem that so many people want to park here, but we only have so much space. So I think as a commissioner, I would have to have an open ear, as we hear proposals and things come up and chances to develop the real estate that we have, to build smarter parking solutions is one part of it, but also, as Brooke and Tess mentioned, looking into alternatives, can we do more in the bikes? I think there's a great opportunity to look into, even with neighboring communities to see about shuttle services and things like that. So I think all of that has to work together so that we can be smart with the space that we do have and find other ways to get people down here.
Thank you. Next up is David Yardley. David, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. Parking is always going to be an issue in the summer when we have so many tourists coming here, but we need to look at is there a parking problem in the winter? Not as much. But when we do have the increased tourism and whatnot, we do need to look at alternatives. Tess outlined some, Brooks outlined some. But I think Chris Lannert, I'm going to refer to him because he's probably, in my opinion, the most expert on this particular subject on this panel up here. And I hope he talks a little bit about what across the street he has an idea for. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we'll hear from Sean Osborne. Sean, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. Growing up here, there's always been a parking issue downtown St. Joe, especially in the summer months. I mean, I remember when you couldn't park down there during the week from all the businesses. I've seen some great ideas, and it's a lot of frustration from a lot of the full-time residents, because the fact is they want to go downtown and they can't find a place to park. There's a lot of alternatives. A lot of them have been mentioned here. I wasn't going to point to a specific name, but I've seen a plan by Chris Lannert that just blows my mind. I welcome, as a commissioner, I would welcome all our residents to bring any and every idea to the commission, so we can look at these, research these ideas. There's solutions, and there's alternatives. There's a lot of things that we could look at to make it much better in those times, those peak travel times, those peak parking times. And I just think we just all need to work together, but I think we do have enough parking to an extent. It's just we got to work with what we have.
Thank you. And it's been mentioned multiple times, but we'll get to hear from Mr. Lannert now. Chris Lannert, you have 1 minute. Thank you.
Well, this will certainly take more than 1 minute. The Downtown Development Authority has been engaged in the parking problem and solution and description for the 3 years that I've been sitting on that committee. As Brooke mentioned, we hired Walker Consultants, a firm out of the Chicagoland area that has a local office, to try and give us the information to be able to make informed decisions on. We are looking at all various options. We really have more of a strategic allocation of parking, because on some days there's parking, on other days there's not parking. The city, as well as the DDA, has looked at different types of 30-minute parking, different places to improve parking. Parking lot 12, which is the one by the Catholic church in school, is underway now. What we're trying to do is have our parking lots be attractive so that we can spread the parking out in terms of that strategic allocation, and thereby disperse traffic and eliminate some of the problems that we have on those key days.
Thank you. Arthur?
The next few questions are a little bit longer, and they will also focus on development, beginning with what should be done with the Curious Kids Museum. Following their disastrous fire, a public debate has ensued over what should happen with the property, as well as who should own it. Curious Kids representatives, eyeing renovation and expansion, recently offered the city $500,000 for the building. The city countered with a contingency that included a first right of refusal provision to buy the building back if the museum operators ever changed course, leading to negotiations between the two parties to break down. There's also been a conversation about relocating the museum in its entirety into this very building. That has proved to be a non-starter so far. In your opinion, what should be done with the Curious Kids Museum? Is its current location optimal, or do you believe there could be a larger opportunity by relocating them elsewhere?
And our first person that will answer this is Michael Fernandez. Michael, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, I was disappointed that the negotiations broke down recently, but I think that the Curious Kids Museum has the potential to continue to be a great asset. Prior to that fire, my wife and I used to take our children there all the time. It's a wonderful place, and I know it's attracted people for a lot of years. I think it's a great location for it, and I'm sad. I think it was a missed opportunity. They had some great plans, and if in the future there's potential to renegotiate or anything, I would be open to having those conversations. But I think the current location is great, and I think they have a long-term vision to enhance their operations and continue to be a resource, and I want them in the city. So,
thank you. Next up, Chris Lannert. Mr. Lannert, you have 1 minute.
Wow, again, a difficult question. I sat on the committee as the Downtown Development Authority representative with the Curious Kids Museum and the city to evaluate this question. We had lots of good meetings. I think the bottom line, particularly from the DDA's position, is that the location is really, really valuable to us in terms of the downtown. We want to try and turn that into a tax base as opposed to a non-taxable entity. We had a number of good conversations, and the Downtown Development Authority did agree with the city to sell the building for $500,000 if in fact there were some contingencies for the protection of both parties. Ultimately, the Curious Kids decided not to do that. I think that they will continue to operate it, properly, but I don't think that the final song has been written on that yet.
Thank you. Next up is Tess Ulrey. Tess, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. I followed this pretty closely when it was coming back and forth to City Commission. Obviously, as a parent in St. Joe, the Curious Kids Museum is kind of an integral part of that. It was disappointing to hear that those communications broke down. I especially understand why the city would want first right of refusal in bringing that, in buying it back and having the ability to turn that into a different space. Right now, I'm not sure if I have a specific answer on this. I'd love to hear more about it. I like the idea of relocating it, especially as parking is a challenge, and that's a prime spot that we can talk about. But I think that there's more to be discussed there.
Thank you. And next up is Sean Osborne. Sean, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. I too, again, was very disappointed that the negotiations broke down. It's a great attraction to the downtown area, especially for our kids. My oldest worked there in high school, which was always really neat, and it was disappointing. It was upsetting to hear about the fire. That was just heartbreaking. I haven't really followed this real close here lately. I'm starting to kind of get up to speed with it. Besides the fact that the negotiations broke down, I'd like to know more. I'd like to research more, hear more, and I'd like to open that line of communication back up with Curious Kids to find out what exactly they would like to do down here by moving it down the hill. That could even help with some of our parking issues, bringing that attraction down here. I just need to know more before I can really give you a comprehensive answer to that question.
Thank you. Next up, David Yardley, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. I do think what the city came up with, at least for the purchase price, was reasonable. Obviously, Curious Kids is a valuable asset to our community and what they've done. I used to take my boys there before they graduated from St. Joe High School and went on to Western Michigan University. It's one of those things, though, the contingency plan or the contingency offer that the city put on it was that they could buy it back basically for the same amount. Well, the Curious Kids Museum is planning on putting millions of dollars of improvements into that. So for a right of refusal and whatnot, I mean, we're not going to be able to buy it back for millions of dollars. So I say, let's sell it to them and let them decide what it's going to be. And we'll, if somebody wants to buy that property, if they decide to move at a future date, then we can do that and leave that up to the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, for this question, Brooke Thomas. Brooke, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. I was also on this committee, so over the past year or so, I've been following this issue very closely. From my point of view, I don't think that negotiations broke down. I think we followed a process that we needed to follow. The building was never for sale, and we had to have a conversation about what made sense for both sides. And I think we did a very good job of exhausting all avenues. Does this make sense for the city? Does it make sense for the Curious Kids Museum? And at this point in time, we discovered it wasn't making sense, so the only thing that happened was that we put that on hold for the time being, and I know that the city would be happy to relook at the issue if it ever needed to come up again. But again, I think that the process worked. We did what we needed to do to see if it made sense for both sides, and we had a lot of productive conversations on both sides of the aisle.
Thank you. Arthur?
A similar debate has played out regarding the future of Tuscornia Park. Aside from its current parking area and picnic pavilion, the park has largely remained unchanged from its natural form, making it a quieter option for beachgoers, bird watchers, and the like. An initial proposal from the city's Parks Advisory Board recommended a larger parking lot, a new higher capacity gathering pavilion, a maintenance shed, a paved nature path, and an area for food trucks. Dozens of citizens testified in opposition to these upgrades, saying it would change the character of the park, which led to a revised master plan recommendation adopted just last night, as I understand it, that only included ADA parking spaces, an ADA mat to the beach, restroom improvements, and a new picnic area. Do you agree with the pared down approach? And in your opinion, what upgrades, if any, should occur at Tuscornia Park?
The first person who has a chance to answer this is Sean Osborne. Sean, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. I was fortunate enough to be at the commission meeting last night when this was a very hot topic for a lot of the residents that live down there. I have to wholeheartedly agree with them that I grew up going to that beach. My stepdad took us there growing up. It's a beautiful beach. it's very natural, and some of the proposed items on the master plan, I think we're a little too far. I believe that as commissioners, we need to listen to the citizens, especially the people that live near the beach. I would use the resources as it comes up to maintain, repair and maintain, become ADA compliant, and repair as needed. And then maybe if there's something down the road, we can readdress it at that point. But I'm with the residents of Tiscornia that we just need to maintain it and take care of it as need be and not go crazy.
Thank you. Next up is David Yardley. David, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. When the property was deeded to the city to be used as a beach, the Warren family wanted it set as a specific quiet beach, just like it is now. And I agree with that. I think we should maintain it as it was intended. The expansion plans that were proposed were overkill by a ton. And I think we need to do like Mr. Osborne said, is, you know, we need to work with the residents there. We need to preserve a certain history to this city for the residents. I mean, the Silver Beach is a county-run, you know, park. That could be the tourist destination, and we keep more of Tiscornia as for our residents, our community beach, if you will. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Tess Ulrey. Tess, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. I love Tiscornia Beach for exactly those reasons as well. And so personally, I'm glad that the improvements that were made, or I apologize, that the plan that was approved was minimal. I think it's great that we put that we're going to be having that mat that comes in, as well as some of that, as well as some of that ADA parking. I think that we have to acknowledge and kind of celebrate our commissioners for really listening to the residents. Those big master plans are exciting, but I think the commissioners really honored the people of St. Joe when they made that decision and approved the pared down one. The only other recommendation that I think I would really ever want to consider is if there's any additional safety measures that can be made, any life-saving equipment. We all know how dangerous the end of the pier can get, but I think that's a separate conversation.
Thank you. Next up is Michael Fernandez. Michael, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, having been present at that meeting last night, I was really satisfied with how I saw that process playing out last night. The plans were presented, and as mentioned, there was a lot of feedback. And at the conclusion of that meeting, you know, the plans changed. You know, the feedback was taken from the public, and the plans were modified in a way that was less, you know, obtrusive. There was less done at the end of the night, you know, versus what was proposed at the beginning. And I think that's consistent with what we want. You know, we want a very natural, you know, beach at that location. So I'm very happy with where we ended up. You know, I think it's important to note, you know, some of the changes that are being proposed, you know, do have to do with, you know, the maintenance, you know, and some of the equipment that park staff wants to have there in order to keep the beach clean and beautiful. You know, so, but very minimal touching of the natural beauty, and I'm very happy with how last night went.
Thank you. Next up is Brooke Thomas. Brooke, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. I also was at the meeting as well, as commissioner, obviously. And I do think that the process worked. We have a Parks Board, and we have resident input, and we all came together, and though it was emotional, it was an opportunity for everybody to voice their point of view. So I appreciated watching that process work out. As far as the improvements, obviously I want all of our parks to be accessible to all people, so those ADA adjustments are a must. They need to be there, as well as safety issues and those kinds of concerns. Another thing that's really important is looking to our future. The things that we have in place, they're going to deteriorate over time. They're going to fall apart. So we just need to have that plan in place to make sure that once those things happen, we have those plans approved so that we can put these new, fresh amenities in to make sure that our parks stay nice for centuries to come.
Thank you. And lastly, Chris Lannert. You have 1 minute.
It probably won't take a whole minute. I agree with exactly what Brooke said. Many people didn't realize that this was a master plan for Tiscornia Park. It was not a redevelopment plan for Tiscornia Park. The Parks Department, the Park Board, as well as the city staff and the committee last night did a yeoman's job of satisfying all of the players. This is a process that has worked. I think it worked well for the city. The most important thing is that there are elements within the master plan which will allow us to apply for grants in the future, and when and if those grants are obtained, then the final discussion of what will happen and what the character will be discussed. And again, a great example of how this community does work, protecting our parks and listening to our citizens, and the volunteer efforts we have by many volunteers that spend endless time on these ideas.
Thank you.
Speaking of grants, the city recently received a Land and Water Conservation Fund grant in the amount of $345,000, as well as a $100,000 donation from the Parks Foundation for the construction of a restroom and pump house at Whirlpool Centennial Park. The project was initially estimated to cost a total of $690,000. However, the lowest bid received for the project was $1.7 million, more than double what was expected. If the commission delays too long in accepting a bid, it loses the grant funding. So instead, they've opted to spend an additional $40,000 to redesign the project in an attempt to bring the price down. This redesign would, of course, result in a dramatically different installation. As a commissioner, would you have approached or handled this situation differently? Is the temptation of the grant worth the total investment or the revised vision?
And the first person that has a chance to answer this is David Yardley. David, you have 1 minute.
I haven't been as up on this particular issue as I should have been with regards to the question. However, I do believe that it should have been handled a lot differently. Basically, anytime you want to do an improvement, you want to know up front what the cost is going to be, what the availability of the resources are going to be. I mean, you know, it's not that if you build it, they will come. That doesn't always work. So we need to look, take a step back, and I think probably not proceed with this particular project as a revised one. If we truly need that pump house, then we need to look at different alternatives, different grant opportunities, and other means of making that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Sean Osborne. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. I just learned about this project not that long ago. So I was at the commission meeting when they approved the $40,500 expenditure to research different ways to build this or complete this project. I understand that when the original bidding process went out, you know, that was pre-pandemic. We had the pandemic costs, it just skyrocketed through the roof, as we all know. We need to take a step back. I agree with Mr. Yardley. We need to take a step back. If we happen to lose that grant, could we reapply for that grant? These are questions I don't have an answer to. I had to process the whole thing that night, so I really didn't get a chance to get up and ask. But I would like to research, if we lose the grant, could we go back and reapply for the grant at a later time? Can the city afford that additional expenditure after what we've received?
Thank you. Next up, Michael Fernandez. You have 1 minute.
Yeah, I think this is where it gets difficult. You know, there's things that you will want to do and things that, you just simply can't afford to do. And so I think, this is an example of, we have great plans, but can we do it? That was a large, number to be surprised, for that to be quoted so high, and that to come up. So we won't always be able to do all the projects that we intend. I think it's a reasonable step to try to reevaluate and see, is there any way that we can potentially make some of this work still? I think that's a reasonable step to take, but ultimately, we work with the information that's available to us and the resources that we have. And so,
Thank you. Next up, Brooke Thomas. Brooke, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. One of the themes that I've noticed over my past 2 years on this commission is that everything costs more than you thought it was when you started the project, which has been quite frustrating for the staff and for the commission to have to make these very difficult decisions, especially when a grant comes into play. I think that this rethinking of things is really important for us to do. We had a plan in place that had all the fancy stuff. Doing this expenditure of $40,000 to rethink it and maybe cut off some of these bells and whistles is really important, because in the long run we are going to save the city a lot of money by doing that. But maybe we can still make those improvements and still get either under the budget or close to the budget, somewhere in that ballpark, so that we can still have nice amenities here that we have in our master plan and have planned to do.
Thank you. Next up is Chris Lannert. You have 1 minute.
Well, another hot button of mine, this whole thing is silly. I mean, can you imagine spending $1.7 million on a 20 by 40 structure just across the field over here? I mean, there's nothing wrong with the philosophy. There's nothing wrong with trying to figure out a better way to maintain the pumps. There's a whole bunch of things, but we're chasing a horse we're not going to catch. And to spend another $40,000 with the same program to try and come in with a building that we can build for $600,000 or $700,000 with the $300,000 grant, and then we only have to spend $300,000 of our money on an 800 square foot building, we're chasing the wrong project. So I think it should be rethought from the beginning and look at what the program that we're trying to attain and the purposes for why we started it a number of years ago. So I'm sorry about that, but I think it's a silly approach.
Thank you. And lastly for this is Tess Ulrey. Tess, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. I spend a lot of time in the grant space in my role at the Boys and Girls Club, and so I understand how some of these things have far more nuance than are presented right up front. I do believe the city made a good choice in saying that they would spend that $40,000 to revisit it, and I think they absolutely made the right choice in not committing to that $1.7 million right off the bat. I see the value that that'll bring, and I think $40,000 is worth it to revisit it, but I'm looking forward to the conversations after that money is spent to see how we can get up to that grant funding.
Thank you. This is News Talk Sports, 94.9 WSJM, Benton Harbor, St. Joseph. And we are here in St. Joseph for the 2023 St. Joseph City Commission Candidate Forum, hosted in partnership with the Southwest Michigan Regional Chamber. We've covered quite a lot, so if you're just joining us, you can always check out the podcast at WSJM.com and the video later on as well. Arthur, what's the next question?
Okay, candidates, if you thought the last three were controversial topics, this might be the most controversial of the bunch. The future of the county courthouse and jail has also proven to be just that, controversial. Both are in need of dire upgrades, and estimates have indicated that it might be more cost-effective and potentially safer to relocate both to Benton Township. While this would open up a historic redevelopment opportunity on prime riverfront property for the city of St. Joe, it would also mean changing the county seat and potentially altering the current ecosystem of attorneys and court employees who work and eat downtown every day. While these are ultimately county properties, should the city take the position that the courthouse and jail should remain where they are, or do you believe there is a greater economic opportunity for the city if it were to redevelop these properties and spur growth on the east side of Maine?
And the first person that has a chance to answer this is Chris Lannert. Mr. Lannert, you have 1 minute.
Jeez, this is, boy, what a great question that is. The difficulty for me is that the people that work in the courthouse, that staff, job generator really helps our downtown during the days when we don't have the tourists. So we have to be very careful from an economic standpoint what happens with the courthouse. I'm not so much married to the jail, but there are some facilities that blend between the courthouse and the jail. We did have that episode a couple of years ago where you can see how some of those difficulties come in. But I'm also aware of the fact that when that property was originally granted to the city, there might be some open space requirements that would preclude it from being any kind of sizable economic development as it relates to just moving those facilities for the sake of trying to find development. So I think there's a deed restriction that precludes that from being development land, not open space land.
Thank you. Next up is Tess Ulrey. Tess, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. My initial thoughts when I hear about the idea of relocating that is that really is an amazing space that we could use here in downtown St. Joe for all of those amazing development opportunities. Relocating the courthouse and the jail, and even to a new and better facility, I think would maybe serve some of those employees as well as some of the individuals utilizing those services much better. I understand the economic impacts of it, but at the same time, we're having conversations about how we don't have enough parking downtown and we want more space for businesses. That seems like a logical step.
Thank you. And next up will be Sean Osborne. Sean, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. So I've only heard rumors of this. I'm not really up to speed on what's going on. I've just heard the rumors going around that it's even being talked about. That Sheriff's Department courthouse, that's always been there. To me, it's a staple of St. Joe. I like the fact that our Sheriff's Department's right there. I don't know if there's talks about taking the road deputies and everything, or if it's just a jail. I would rather see if we can't work with the county to see what we can do as a city to keep that there. Not only is it the employees, the people that live in this community that work there. I like having that extra police there. We've got the sheriff's deputies. We got some of the best police that you could ever ask for in this community. St. Joe City, St. Joe Township, Lincoln Township. I would hate to see them move farther out. Sorry about that. I'd hate to see them out with it increased response times. So I would rather keep them here, best we can.
Thank you. Next up is Michael Fernandez. Michael, you have 1 minute.
The jail and the courthouse, they serve more than just St. Joseph. And I think that if there's an opportunity to improve, our facilities and the future of, the courthouse and the jail, so that we can have better facilities, more efficient, whatever the challenges that those facilities are currently facing, if we can make those things better, that's beyond just St. Joe. And with that, it brings an opportunity to, it brings a moment of, well, what do we do with this space now if the county, decides to move the jail and the courthouse? That will be, a lot of collaboration and opportunity to collaborate, with the county as, they figure out their new plan for the courthouse and the jail. And then a challenge for us, to figure out what do we do with this new space to develop. But, if it can be an improvement to the facilities of the courthouse and the jail that we, have, those are beyond just St. Joe needs. Those serve the whole county, and I would support that.
Thank you. Next up is David Yardley. David, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. One of the things that we do have to look at, this is a county decision more so than it is a St. Joe City Commission decision. So obviously we need to leave it up to our county commissioners. We should be communicating with them through our main county commissioner here, Rayante Bell. And I think we need to have better communication through him and the other commissioners on this. However, we do have the Undersheriff, Chuck Height here, and I would direct all questions to the Sheriff's Department to Chuck, so make sure you nail Chuck before he leaves. But anyway, obviously, if they do move, it's an opportunity for us. Obviously, there's a huge parking lot there that would solve a lot of parking issues for the summer. But at the same time, the building's going to need to be, refurbished and reutilized if possible. There is a lot of issues with the county buildings, especially those two in particular as being very old. So we do need to look at that, and thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, for this one, Brooke Thomas, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. I obviously want to do what makes the most sense for everybody in our whole community, in our whole county. So I would definitely want to learn more about what that option is. I would hate to see them leave because I do like having all the employees and staff at the courthouse, and I do frequent the courthouse for my job, so selfishly I would hate for it to move further away from where I live. But ultimately, I really love the idea of St. Joe being a leader in our whole community and having all those leaders here locally. It's just something that I really like having here in St. Joe.
Thank you. Arthur?
This one's a little bit easier. The City of St. Joseph is roughly a $30 million enterprise, and as Commissioner, you'll be entrusted with the financial stewardship of these funds. What specific experiences or credentials qualify you to manage these funds on behalf of city residents?
First up on this question is Tess Ulrey. Tess, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. So currently, I'm a lifelong nonprofit employee, so I understand city is a little bit different, but a lot of aspects of that line up pretty closely. Right now, I do work in resource development for the Boys and Girls Club. We have a $6 million operating budget. Outside of that, I also serve on community boards, and I'm used to financial oversight in that capacity as well. I haven't managed anything close to the size of $30 million, but I'm absolutely ready to learn and have the foundation to do so.
Thank you. And next up is Sean Osborne. Sean, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. So in my past, I have worked in multiple areas that I've had to deal with the budget, the largest being that with the wireless carrier that I work for, I had more than a $30 million a year budget that we had very strict guidelines to go by. Now, anybody that knows me knows I love to spend money. I like to spend my money. I am very fiscally conservative when it comes to spending other people's money, especially taxpayers' money. I want to know that every dime is put to good use and for the betterment of our residents. Working in the small business community, I see the struggles, and I've helped work with financial situations and those, but the biggest one I have to go off of is the network that I worked when, we had a massive budget. People don't understand what it cost to build that stuff, but we had very stringent, tight guidelines, and we had to meet our expectations, or we didn't get the money.
Thank you. Could I have you move your microphone just a little closer to you? Just, you, Mr. Osborne, just move it a little closer to you next time. Next up is Brooke Thomas. Brooke, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. I think we had the same question 2 years ago, and now I can say I have 2 years' experience as city commissioner overseeing a budget, so I'm thankful for that experience. You don't have to be an expert on how to put together a budget. You just have to have trust in the staff that you have doing those things. And from my point of view, I do have trust in our staff. They do an excellent job of putting that together and explaining every question that I have. And I think that's one of the important things as a commissioner is that you ask the right questions and you don't stop asking until you get the answers that you're looking for. And that way you have the trust in the process. Outside of being commissioner, I've also served on various nonprofit boards as well, so that kind of gives me a different perspective of something outside of city government to kind of compare and contrast those two experiences.
Thank you. Next up is David Yardley. David, you have 1 minute.
All right, thank you. Having worked for the state of Michigan, as I currently do with Senator Jonathan Lindsay and previous work there, I've seen in oversight responsibilities from the legislative angle over the whole state of Michigan budget. So, I've had to learn how that all works, and it does pretty much relate to city government. So beyond that, I've had a lot of management experience in running nonprofits and political committees and other nonprofit entities and foundations throughout my years in working with chambers of commerce and others. So thank you.
Thank you. Next is Michael Fernandez. You have 1 minute.
Yeah, I've had some personal and professional experiences that I think have prepared me, for, being responsible for the budget. Professionally, I've worked for financial institutions, where I was responsible for managing the operations budget, and managing the money within the branch. I was a branch manager. I've also had experience with political fundraising and accounting compliance. I serve as a finance director for our state representative. And those experiences, I think, have prepared me. On top of that, I'm also for St. Joe Rocket Football, I'm their fundraising chair. And those things, in addition to utilizing the city staff to give me the information that I don't have and answer the questions that I will have, those things will prepare me for this.
Thank you. And lastly, for this question, Chris Lannert, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. Well, I'm kind of a value-added type of guy, so I think that while you have to watch what you're paying for, you also have to simultaneously watch where your revenues are coming from. I have been watching closely the kinds of things that the city's doing. As I mentioned earlier in one of my questions or one of my answers, is that while the staff does do a very good job of budgeting, and while the capital improvement program that we have is adequate and well thought out, I think there's a little bit of too much of the silo mentality that I mentioned before, where we could have more liaisons between our various departments and spend the same dollar and get twice the value out of it. So I would use my experience to help allocate the budget along the lines of what has been done in the past, not trying to make any wholesale changes, but again, trying to build value and double up on some things and not spend our dollars twice, because we've done that a couple of times.
Thank you. Arthur?
In recent years, there's been a growing concern regarding the availability of affordable housing. For example, the current median home price in the city of St. Joseph is $285,000, which represents a 4.6% increase just from this time last year. This, as you know, leaves many members of our community struggling to find housing that fits within their budget. If elected to the City Commission, what specific policies or initiatives do you propose to address the housing crisis in our community? And how do you plan to ensure that these efforts are effective and equitable for residents of all income levels?
First person who has a chance to answer that is Michael Fernandez. You have 1 minute.
I would look for us to, revisit the ordinances and see, is there anything in the ordinances that allows us to, build more housing in other areas? Look for opportunities as they arise, from partners in the community that want to build more housing or modify existing assets to make more housing. Like you mentioned, the housing prices have skyrocketed, and there's a real possibility that I wouldn't have been able to afford my home to live in the city today had I not bought it several years ago. It's a real challenge, and I think it's one that we need to tackle head on and find ways to make more houses and find ways to make it easier for families to afford to move here and live here. So,
Thank you. Next up, Tess Holry. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. So this topic is near and dear to my heart. Like I mentioned, I am a renter. I will probably always be a renter as well. When I consider what affordable housing means in the city of St. Joe, I think it's very nuanced. I think we need to support those homeowners who are willing to rent, and we need to think creatively about how we can support them so they in turn can rent to people like me. I'm a single parent of 2 little girls in the school system, and I think it's important for me to be able to live in the city too. I also, like Michael said, I think it's important for us to revisit some of those ordinances and zoning. When I lived in Precinct 1, I actually lived right next door to City Hall, up above the Bertuca Insurance Building. There's a lot of opportunity for creative apartments and spaces there if we really get together and start thinking about it. I think this also, of course, loops back to that conversation we're having about short-term rentals and just maintaining a good vision as a community of how we can keep people here year-round as well. So I look forward to working on this a lot.
Thank you. Next up, Brooke Thomas. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. This is a big problem. Like you said, the housing prices are high, and the median household income in St. Joe is $60,000, and that's for the whole household, not just per person. So obviously that's a problem for people who want to purchase in the city. They can't afford it. One of the classes and trainings that I took was about affordable housing and how you can tweak your zoning and ordinances to meet those needs. Getting creative as far as maybe adjusting lot coverage or different lot lines and things like that so that you can maybe put some smaller homes in that are a little bit more affordable to people with lower incomes. And I think that's something that the city is looking into and open to looking at more deeply, and that's something I would support as a commissioner.
Thank you. Next up is David Yardley. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. Affordable housing is something that I've been dealing with a lot through Harbor Country Mission. In looking at the county and obviously specifically St. Joe, we have a lot of homeless people in this county. People don't realize it, but it's true. We do. And, and part of that is they can't find the housing that they need. Zoning is the #1 way that we as a city can affect that by changing lot sizes, changing house sizes, tiny homes and various other things are one way to approach that. But we need to work with our business community and the developers that are out there to make sure that we look at ways of cutting costs for the requirements that they need to meet as they're producing new housing and new developments in our area. So we need to, again, this is back to that communication with the businesses within our area, and we need to make sure that we do that properly. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Chris Lannert. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. This is near and dear to my heart. I've probably developed thousands and thousands of acres and thousands of units throughout the Midwest and the country. It's an issue that is touched by all the people that have previously mentioned things. It's code, it's ordinances, it's responsibility, it's a willingness to try things new. It's new techniques, new technologies that are coming out. Brooke mentioned accessible dwelling units where you actually can build a small cottage behind your property and rent it as affordable housing either for yourself and or for a renter. Those are kinds of things that are very difficult to get done within the community structure that most communities have. It's hard to change your ordinances. The average age of most people on most plan commissions tends to be more on my side than on Brooke's side, and so it's difficult for people to realize that someone might want less than what their dream was. but it's absolutely a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and I have some solutions.
Thank you. And lastly is Sean Osborne. You have 1 minute.
This is kind of a double-edged sword. As a homeowner, I've enjoyed watching my property go up in value, but we were looking at moving, my wife and I, and the cost of living with the influx of everybody that has wanted to come here and enjoy this great city with us has kept our values up, and in fact increased it exponentially. I'm no expert in real estate or land development. I would look to Chris Lannert for advice or, more data to support that. I mean, I'm all for affordable housing. I don't want to have things crammed in on top of one another, but yet we do have that issue of homeless. We have the issues of affordable housing where people can't afford. To some extent, we're almost pricing ourselves out of homes due to those high costs. So there's a lot that can be done. We just have to take a hard look at it.
Thank you. Arthur?
Candidates, our next question is going to focus on a major topic of conversation over the past year, and that's population growth. Michigan has had the second slowest growth rate in the nation since 1990, and as a result of our stagnation, several states have surpassed us in terms of total population. Berrien County has not fared much better. Our county's population has declined by over 3,700 residents since 2010 alone, and the city of St. Joseph accounted for about 600 of those residents. Fewer residents, as you know, means fewer available workers, fewer customers, fewer students, and less tax revenue for our communities. So the question is this: what is keeping our area from growing population, and what do you intend to do as a city commissioner to reverse our decline?
And first person to answer this is Brooke Thomas. Brooke, you have 1 minute.
One thing that I think the city is starting to do, and I want to promote more of this, is making our area more attractive to multiple different backgrounds of people, whether it's different age groups, different genders, different socioeconomic status. So let's do things in our city that's going to appeal to all people. We need to get things like the public space activation going, that we're going to attract younger people so that they can grow their families here and they want to come back here because it's a place that people want to come back home to. I hear a lot of my friends moving away from here because there's not enough to do or there's not enough people to meet. So if we can make this attractive to our younger populations where they want to come home, I think that would be one solution. And I would be open to looking at working with other businesses to make more of those public activation spaces and things that are attractive to those younger populations.
Thank you. And next up is Sean Osborne. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. Can you repeat the question, please? I've got so many things running through my head at the moment.
Yeah, in short, what is keeping our area from growing population, and what do you intend to do as a city commissioner
Thank
to
you.
reverse the decline?
So there's so much of this, I think, that goes to a state level, not necessarily a city or even a county level. I've had quite a few friends that have left. The job market has moved them out of this area. Relatives have moved out of the area due to jobs or taxes. This is a really tough question that I don't necessarily have an answer to at the moment. I need to think about that. I know we need to attract younger people that want to, raise their families here, like some of us have been able to. But getting the cost down, the property values are up. It's a tough situation. It's a tough call. I don't really have a real good answer at this moment.
Thank you. Next is David Yardley. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. Well, first we need to look to the leadership of Arthur Havlicek in the chamber and other entities throughout our county and throughout our area, Lake Michigan College and the other entities that we have like Connexus to help find jobs for people and make sure that we have an ability to absorb these individuals that we want to move to our community. I mean, it is a statewide problem. It's a nationwide problem in a lot of areas. We have auto workers striking, and that's affecting a lot of the feeder markets are the smaller manufacturers that supply them, which is going to affect us here in a big way if this all continues. So we need to look at economic development means that we could bring more businesses in, to have the jobs, to provide the housing and all those other things. And Arthur, we look to you for leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Chris Lannert. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. Well, you can't fight demographics. The whole country's looking at losing population. In a couple places, it's shifting back and forth. I think that what we have to do here is continue to attract people to come to this area because of the natural amenities that we have, because of the great school district that we have, because of all the other amenities that are incorporated into what we call home. Try and get those people to come here and then stay here. And then as we address that particular aspect, then we have to get back into the affordable housing question that just came back up. But we have to grow a bigger pie in order to get a better tax base, in order to increase the population and thereby pay more of our bills efficiently.
Thank you. Next is Tess Ulrey. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. I think that, like a lot of the other candidates have mentioned, this is a larger issue than just in St. Joe. But in some ways, that's a positive thing. Michigan keeps being ranked as one of the states that will be least affected by climate change, so we can look at that as a positive part about Michigan growth. And also, frankly, with the Michigan legislature flipping blue, that's going to make Michigan a more attractive place for us to be as well. Here locally in St. Joe, we have some things that I know that we can celebrate. I think that our school board here, especially as we look at what's happened with neighboring school districts, has done an amazing job of keeping our district really forefront in the state. Like other people have mentioned too, of course this loops back to a conversation about affordable housing and keeping those events and other opportunities open for all. I think too, in St. Joseph, the more we do surrounding some of these diversity and inclusion work that the City Commission has worked so hard on, that will continue to make St. Joseph in particular an attractive place for more and more people to move to.
Thank you. And lastly for this question, Michael Fernandez, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, I think a specific area of focus for me would be, how can we attract young families to live here? When I think about my family, I'm raising them here, and my hope is that my children will grow here and maybe choose to live here too, or move away, have their own adventures. But attracting families that have the potential to raise their children here. So how do we get those families here? We talked about a couple of things that we need to do. We need to find places for them to live. That's one thing that we need to do to get them here. And then give them things to do. We have great schools, that can support their children's growth. We have, opportunities to, build new things that'll enable families to live, full, rich lifestyles. Giving people something to do once they're here, and looking at our regulations. Are our ordinances and everything, do they allow our citizens to live their fullest lives, so that we make sure that we're an attractive place? I don't like hearing of people not wanting to move someplace that's too restricted, et cetera. So making sure that we're open to families.
Thank you. Arthur?
Well, that concludes the question portion for tonight's forum, but each candidate will have 1 minute to conclude with a closing statement, and please try to include a factor that you believe sets you apart from your opponents.
Well, down the line from the other end of the table, David Yardley, you got 1 minute.
All right, thank you. First of all, I'd also want to thank everyone for coming out this evening. It's wonderful to see so many people that's interested in the future of our city, so thank you. I think I've talked a lot about Harbor Country Mission and working for the state government. So I have a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge regarding opportunities that have existed all over the state. I've visited so many cities and townships and villages throughout this state that I've seen a lot of things that we can apply here in utilizing my knowledge from my nonprofit background, as also the political and my business background working with chambers of commerce. Actually, once upon a time I worked for the predecessor to the Southwest Michigan Chamber of Commerce as the Twin Cities Chamber. So I think that I bring a lot of experience and knowledge from a statewide perspective that would make a difference here and keep your taxes low and have more opportunities and more freedom to do with what you want with your property. Thank you.
Thank you. Tess Ulrey?
Thank you. Echoing Mr. Yardley, thank you all for being here and for being invested in this process. Local government isn't always exciting to everybody, but I think it's really amazing to see the turnout in a place like this. Reflecting on myself as a candidate, I think the strongest thing I can bring to City Commission is that I am here in St. Joe for the long haul. I mentioned my two girls that are here. I'm committed to living here and in this community and making decisions that don't just benefit the next 5 years, the next 10 years, but realistically what this community can look like for them as they grow and hopefully stay in St. Joe as well. So I think that for me, that focus on maintaining a relevant community for years to come will be a great one. Thank you.
Thank you. Brooke Thomas?
Thank you. I think I've made it clear that I've been on the commission for 2 years now, and with this new election coming up, we are losing 2 people with a lot of experience on the commission, so that means we're only gonna have 3 people with experience on the commission. So I think having even just 2 years of that experience makes me valuable. I've put in a lot of time and hours into attending various trainings, making connections with people both in and outside of our city. And I've learned so much over the past 2 years, and I've enjoyed every minute of it, and I want to continue doing this work. I love serving our city in this capacity, and I think that being hardworking, open-minded, and eager to learn makes me an excellent candidate to continue in this position.
Thank you. Sean Osborne?
Well, I'd like to start off by thanking our hosts, and I'd like to thank everybody that's here. I see a lot of familiar faces and a lot of people I look forward to getting to know. As you can probably tell, I'm not a politician. I jumped into this at the last minute, so I'm stumbling around a little bit. I have a lot to learn. I've worn a lot of hats in my life, everywhere, you know, anything you could think of. So I like data, I like facts, and I like to make smart decisions, informed decisions. So with my entire background, I just think that, and my desire to serve, I would like to be one of your city commissioners so I can do what's best for the city for now and long term. I was born and raised here, raised 2 beautiful girls here, married my high school sweetheart. I've moved away, I've come back, and it's just this city has brought me back. And so it's an honor to be here, and I just want to thank everybody.
Thank you. Chris Lanner?
Thank you. I want to echo what everyone else has said. Thank you for all being here. A big part of my thought process in terms of wanting to serve is to not only serve for you, but serve with you. It's really nice to have this many people in the audience. The meeting last night was attended by lots of people. Local government works best when people participate. We need to have a forum whereby those people can participate. My whole professional career has been in planning and zoning and writing ordinances and comprehensive plans, building developments, making special places and things like that. When I graduated from St. Charles High School in '66, I didn't want to move away and never come back like many of my classmates. I always wanted to come back. I first moved here, and as I mentioned earlier, I started buying properties down on Lions Park Drive 25 years ago. Now I'm here. My mom, my sister, my kids, my grandkids all live here. I want to be here. I'm going to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Fernandez?
Yeah, this campaign has given me a great opportunity to learn about a lot more of my fellow citizens, and I hope that I've given you all an opportunity to learn more about what's important to me and how I feel about things. Like I said, this community is where I am planning to raise my children, and I'm committed to living here and being a part of making this place better, and taking care of the things that we love the most about it. As your commissioner, the last thing I'll leave you with is, this is a responsibility to take care of the city for both myself and for you. It would be my duty to be your advocate. And so with me, you will always have, an open avenue to speak to me so that I can be your advocate. So I hope you'll give me that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you as well to all of our candidates for being here and joining us this evening. Thank you again to Arthur Havlicek and the Southwest Michigan Regional Chamber for partnering with us for tonight's public service and make this public service possible. Thank you to those who've been following along with us on News Talk Sports 94.9 WSJM, on our Facebook Live, on WSJM.com and the WSJM app, as well as those who've been with us right here in person in the Shadowland Ballroom. And thank you again to Shadowland Ballroom for providing this great venue, and to Silver Beach Pizza for delivering appetizers for the networking portion that's about to begin. Once again, I'm Johnny Reinhardt alongside Arthur Havlicek. Also, thanks to our wonderful engineering team, Terry Green, Ken Lundberg on the videos, and as well as Zach East. And thank you, everyone, and good night. Well, 3 minutes off. It's fine. John's tough.